يلا عبد الله.
You can start.
تمام. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining the joint panel roundtable between Omran Center and ORSAM Center. Omran and ORSAM are one of the major think tanks based in Turkey. They issue and publish a lot of paper and policy brief about different development in the region, MENA region precisely, and help all the decision maker and other audience to build up some kind of a good idea or a good analysis about significant development in the region. So one of the main things that recently both Omran and ORSAM were focusing on was the Iranian influence or presence and even the set of tools that Iran is using in the region. Our main topic today will be assisting this role, the Iranian role in the different area of the region, which are the main areas that Iran concentrate on, which is Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Turkey. We will go through these different areas, and we will end in how Turkey how the Turkish-Iranian relationship got affected throughout the Iranian presence and influence in this region, in these regions. With us today, we have an amazing panelists. They are all experts when it comes to the Iranian file in different regions. They were able to build they were able to actually build the legacy for them in regard of when it comes to the Iranian and their local militia and their set of tools and how they were able to secure their influence or presence in different regions. So we will be starting in a geographical order, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. We have now for the Iraqi file, Dr. Hamidi Maleki. He's a non-follow researcher at Washington Institute, specialized in the Shia militia. He's the co-founder of Spotlight. Spotlight is a platform that actually analyzed the Iranian role and the Shia militia. Dr. Hamidi, I will start with you. You have the green light to talk about whatever you see is important. But I would like to ask a couple of questions in regard of the Iranian file in Iraq. It's very important to us to understand what kind of tools the Iranian are using recently to secure their influence and presence, and what changed after the Iranian election, after the US election, and did Qasem Soleimani assassination had a direct effect on the Iranian influence in Iraq? And exactly what do you see the future of Iran in Iraq with all the news about the US idea or US thought about leaving Iraq? Dr. Hamdi, تفضل.
Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be talking among such a distinguished panel. Too many questions, I think, many questions you presented, which are very important, each of them. As for what are Iranian tools in Iraq, the answer is very simple, and I think everybody knows it. It's proxies. The Iran-backed militias, the self-styled resistance or muqawma in Iraq. And Iran is trying to provide different types of supports for these different groups in order for them to be able to dominate the Iraqi political and security and even economic scene. We start with weaponry, as we saw in the in the first PMF, or Popular Mobilization Forces military parade, Iran has provided different types of weaponries, many of them in an illegal way, because PMF is part of the Iraqi state. So all the weaponry that they acquire needs to go through the Iraqi government, but in many cases it doesn't. And the most recent weaponry that Iran is providing for its proxies in order for them to keep being a dominant force in the security sphere is actually the drones. More sophisticated drones we have seen that have been provided to the Iranian-backed militias in Iraq. They are helping. I mean, Iran is helping them to manufacture some more rudimentary examples of these weaponries, and also how to operate them. And the operations that we have seen in recent months, obviously now we can see a lull. We can talk about the reason why we have seen a decrease in the number of attacks. But before this decrease in the attacks, we saw that the drone attacks became more sophisticated in terms of the ability to bypass the anti-air systems, and also air defense systems, and also the fact that the Iranian militias are increasingly willing to target neighboring countries. So if in the past we had only seen attacks on US interests or troops in Iraq, now we see that the Iranian-backed militias use Iraq as a platform to attack Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and some US bases in Syria. One of the very important aspects that Iran has really Iran and its proxies in Iran have really invested a lot in recent months, especially after the killing of Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes, or maybe before that, especially after the Tishreen movements, the anti-Iran protest movement, is media capabilities. Again, in order for Iran to be able to use its proxies to dominate the scene in Iran and in Iraq, and to be able to make strategic decisions or shape strategic decisions, they need to have they have come to the conclusion that they need to have media capabilities, and that this is increasingly what's happening in terms of the ability for propaganda operations, info operations, disinformation, and they are using both social media and traditional media in more innovative ways, if you like. And we can see that now some of these platforms, some of these social media platforms are transforming from disinformation and propaganda platform to targeting platforms. So they are becoming, some of them, increasingly operating like intelligence cells to target people. And like what we saw the day before yesterday and yesterday, of the targeting of one member of UNAMI, the United Nations mission in Iraq, how actually they target him. And this is an influential tool in order for the Iran-backed militias to try and limit the presence of international organizations and agencies in Iraq. Another area that Iran is helping its militias to expand their presence and their influence, and in turn that will obviously increase Iran's influence in Iraq, is cybersecurity and hacking. Again, the Iran-backed militias in Iraq are not very advanced when it comes to hacking and cybersecurity. IRGC definitely is much more advanced. Lebanese Hezbollah is much more advanced when it comes to cybersecurity and hacking, but the Iraqis are catching up. They are learning, they are trained by IRGC and also Lebanese Hezbollah agents. The other type of support that has been given to the Iraqi militias in recent years is clearly political support. And that is especially important when we have an election season, such as what we are going to see in less than 1 month in Iraq. However, I need to emphasize on the fact that after the killing of Soleimani and Mohandes, this capability has diminished. because Soleimani was a very capable political figure, and he had a right hand man to help him, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, to maneuver within the Muqawma. And we know that the Iraqi self-styled Muqawma, to an extent, suffering from differences among them, and it was very important for an authoritative figure to bring them together in order to pursue Iranian objectives in Iraq, and that has gone. In terms of financial aid, we are seeing less and less financial aid from Iran. That for two main reasons. One is because after the establishment of the PMF in 2015, we can see that these militias are enjoying Iraqi state budget, so they are less dependent on Iran, and also because of the Trump's administration maximum pressure policy, Iran did not have the amount of money at its disposal that it used to have, so that has decreased. Iran is not only focusing on people who are overtly Muqawma or linked to the supreme leader ideologically. Iran is finding influential figures who are not overtly Muqawma in different types, in different parts of society. You can see them as governors. Some of them are political figures, but not necessarily overtly a Muqawma people. And Iran is actually creating a bond with these people. And this is very important because this will allow Iran to go beyond the Muqawma support base, and also it will enable Iran to present candidates, for example, for premiership, who are not receiving serious objections, because they're not overtly Muqawma. This is a very important. I mean, hopefully we at the Militia Spotlight at the Washington Institute will focus more on this aspect, because it's increasingly an important aspect. I'm mindful of the time, so I will go quickly to the second question about the elections or the new administrations, both in Iran and the United States. As for the new administration in the United States, the Biden administration brought with it the possibility of another JCPOA agreement with Iran, the nuclear deal. Yes, it's been very sluggish. It doesn't seem to be very successful. The negotiations have failed to a great extent, but still Iran is hopeful that it will persuade the United States to lift the very harsh sanctions on its economy as soon as possible. Again, Iran doesn't show that it is in a hurry to do that, because it wants to achieve this objective under its own terms. So, for example, it wants the United States to first release billions of dollars of frozen assets, and also it wants to exclude any talks apart from the nuclear deal in the negotiation, and that will include Iran-backed militias in Iraq and the other countries in the region. However, it is very important for Iran to achieve such an agreement as soon as possible and to allow its economy to breathe. That is why, and this will definitely impact on Iran-backed militias' policies in Iraq, because they do not want, for example, to kill US soldiers, because that would really complicate Biden's administration's position going into the negotiations. If you have an incident in which 5 US troops are killed, then, as I said, it would be much more complicated. So Biden administration brought the opportunity for a nuclear deal, a new nuclear deal, and that impacts how the Iraqi militias act. The other aspect of Biden's administration is the predictability of this administration. When you compare that to Trump administration, the Iranian-backed militias were really on their toes when especially after the killing of Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandisi in Baghdad. They were really not happy, and they were really anxious about the possibility of being assassinated or being targeted, either their bases or their leadership by Trump's administration. Now that possibility is not completely diminished, especially that they also fear the Israeli factor as well. But still, you can see that leaders such as Qais al-Khazali, the leader of Asa'ib Ahl al-Haq, freely moving in different parts of Baghdad, whereas during the Trump administration, he was completely hiding. With the new administration in Iran, obviously we can see a unification of stances or positions when it comes to Iran regional policies. During Rouhani, you had the IRGC, which had the upper hand and the louder voice, and you had the so-called reformists who were more leaning towards having a kind of dialogue in the region. Whereas now we can see that even the presidency is in the hands of a hardliner whose position is completely in line with the IRGC. And you have a new foreign minister, Amir Abdullahian, who used to be Qasem Soleimani's aide. Having said that, I do not think that we will see a material change in the Iran's performance in the region, for one very simple fact, and that is that even during Rouhani and Zarif as the foreign minister, the IRGC had the upper hand, and any type of objection to IRGC's policies in the region were suppressed. I don't know if you have time for me.
Dr. Hamdi, yeah, you have 1 minute left if you want.
Okay, I am. I think I'm finished. I'm going to finish
Great.
here, and then we can go back in the QA.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamdi. That was actually that took me personally into different whole level. It's always important to see things from the owner of a specific region. We always try to duplicate our thoughts in different areas, but we always end up understanding that things are not similar. We might have the same initial set of tools, but the main goal, the end goal, the behavior during the implementation of whatever kind of influence and presence is different from one region to another. Thank you, Dr. Hamdi, once again. Now we will go in a geographical order. We will shift into the Syrian file. Personally, I'm also concentrating recently a lot about Iran influence in Syria, focusing mainly on the softer tools that Iran recently used and how they evolved their actual control or presence, and how they were able to shift from a military security field into a softer way of dealing with the society in order to infiltrate communities, have a relationship with specific businessmen, even to play some kind of a role in the parliament. Also recently, we witnessed something very interesting, is that Iran was able to continue playing a sabotage role despite the Russian attempt from excluding it in specific file. The Russian in 2018, when it comes to Dar'a, made up this reconciliation and settlement with different areas, hoping to not create a gap on the security aspect, which Iran might use, just like what Iran did in Aleppo and Deir ez-Zor. So basically, in 2018, that was the Russian attempt. But recently, we saw during the ongoing negotiation in Dar'a al-Balad that still Iran was able to affect the whole negotiation throughout their local allies. So this is something totally also we need to concentrate on. But I talked a lot about this because it's very interesting and it's very important to me, this file. In regard of the Syrian file, We have Mr. Bassam Barabandi is one of the first Syrian diplomats who defected from the regime. He is the co-founder of External Relation for People Demand Change. He's a good friend of mine, and he's expert when it comes to the Iranian file. Mr. Bassam, when it comes to Iran, we don't want to go to the past a lot. We just want to understand exactly the similar era of time or period, how Iran adapting with the new election in Iran, did this affect their end goal in Syria? The US administration, how does it look to the Iranian in Syria with the nuclear deal? And what do you see Iran like main goal in the upcoming future?
Thank you, Navvar. Thank you, Hamdi, for this very beautiful presentation. It's disturbing, actually. It's more than disturbing. Look, when we talk about Iran and Syria, there's no way to ignore the history. Assad, the father, Hafiz Assad, he get his legitimacy to be president from being Alawite as part of the Shia by Imam al-Sadr at that time. And he built that kind of relation that if this regime want to survive, it survived because of the Shia. And he built that relation with the Iranian Khamenei from early days of the revolution, Imam al-Khomeini. And they built that relation till today. So for Assad, he thinks that he exists because of Iran, the sun. And in the meantime, Iran used its soft power from 1979 in Syria. So the Iranian influence in Syria wasn't new, it was limited. They start to build shrines like Sayyidah Ruqayya shrines in the middle of Damascus in the 80s, mid of 80s. It's a big challenge for the Sunni community. Assad has no problem at that time, Hafiz Assad. And they built big shrine just next to Umayyad Mosque. So this is kind of soft power to see the Iranian were testing how much they can go in Syria. They tried to build large number of Syrian businessmen who have good contact with Iran during the Iraqi-Iranian war. So they opened channels with so many business people to import some materials, sometimes military materials from Europe to Iran through Syria during the war. So this is another soft power things. The big things that between Syria and Iran, it was building Hezbollah. And before building Hezbollah, destroying PLO as a Sunni uncontrolled militia in Lebanon and replace it by Hezbollah as a Shia-controlled militia in Lebanon, as proxy, as we can call it. And that was big projects, Syrian-Iranian projects in Lebanon. Yet during Hafiz Assad time, there was kind of limitation of how much Iran can do in Syria. For example, when Iranian jump into the lines, according to Assad, Hafiz Assad red lines, and they had deal with Israel about the weapons. At that time, it was the Syrian who leaked that information that Iran is dealing with Israel. It was the Shira in Lebanon. It was the first who published it. So you see, during Assad time, there was kind of balance how much Iran can do and act away from Syria. During Bashar al-Assad, things was completely in opposite direction. Even Bashar claims to be moderate, claims to be more open to the West, free market, banks. We saw a lot of things he did, but at the same time, he was 100% with Iran. Iran built for Syria a nuclear reactor that Israel destroyed in 2017, I think, or 2007. But it shows how much Assad trusted by Iranian, or how much Iran trusted by Assad. So this is very important background to say Assad is already with Iran before the revolution. All his base was on Iran. And he made cosmetic conversation and visiting and changing on the surface on Syrian economy or society just to praise the West and get more money. But deep inside, he was there. We cannot say that Iran at that time, they never try to expand its project in the region because this is Tasdir Thawra, this is exporting the revolution. This is the basic of Khomeini theory. They couldn't do that during Hafiz Assad, They were more open to do with that during Bashar al-Assad first 10 years, and the revolution opened the doors for them to be involved from day one. And we are paying the price till today. So today, Iran is the leading power in Syria. They have more, they sent their, number one, early days 2011, they sent their experts, then they sent their militia from Iraq, from Syria, from Lebanon, from Yemen. Then they sent IRGC, then Qasem Soleimani himself was leading some of big battles in Syria. Then they get the Russians. So you see that involvement, it was growing day by day without limitation, till to reach to the point that they were controlling the Syrian regime army. They were controlling its movement, supply lines, the people in charge of each unit, how much they are loyal to Iran, they are trying to work with Iran, or they are with the Russians. Today, I don't think there is very limited number of Syrian officers or Syrian politicians with the regime. They become either with Iranian line or with the Russian line, but we don't have Syrian line in between, either with Bashar al-Assad, and Bashar al-Assad is very much with Iran, or some key high officer with the army who are with the Russian line. So Iran in Syria is not what they did in Iraq, where they have militia, they came to fight the Americans, or they were not in Lebanon, where you have civil war. They empowered their own part of the population of Lebanese who are Shia. Syria is unique in a way that Syria is Sunni. We don't have American invasion. They need to make changes in Syria. So we have 10 million Syrian left their lands toward Turkey and Europe. It's just demographic changes. It's purposely, I think, designed to make Iran have more space to work without too much Sunni against it. The Syrian regime become the proxy of Iran, supported by Iraqi militia and Hezbollah militia. But it's the leader who make orchestra or all this movement is the Iranian IRGC. We saw there is competition between Russian and Iran, I think, on the sphere of influence, not on the interest. Iranian, they want the land. Literally, they want Syrian land. And that's why I think they are doing all these demographic changes. They have a dream to have this, the old empire that reached to the Mediterranean, reached to Israeli-Palestinian, and reached to the whole Arab world. So that's why we see what's going on in Yemen, for example, the Houthi. So it's not separate from Syria. It's the same line, same movements, same things move forward. The Americans, unfortunately, they always, during Obama, the priority was to have a deal with Iran, nuclear deal with Iran. They closed their eyes on Iranian activities in Syria. And they used to tell us in direct or indirect way, the people Syrian in DC, that we don't want to give Iranian any incentive to be away of negotiations. So no matter what they will do in Syria, 2014, 2015, and before, we will handle it, but we will not act against it, because the major thing for us as US administration is to let them have signed the deal. During Trump, even Trump was very harsh on Iran, maximum pressure. He never cared about Syria. So he cares about Syria because Iranians were in Syria, but he never tried to benefit from the maximum pressure policy to flip things in Syria, at least politically. So there was maximum pressure. IRGC and Assad regime, they suffered a lot economically, but there was no vision with the Trump administration in general that how we benefit from this maximum pressure policy to make something good for the Syrian people politically, dealing with Russia or something. So they just put sanctions. They hit so many targets, Iranian target in Syria, but they never be able to move one step further to change the political situation in Syria, at least to be in favor for Syrian people, not to the United States. We miss, that was big opportunity missing during Trump to move, to benefit from maximum pressure here. Today, the coming administration or Biden administration, we back to Obama administration. When they look in the region, it's driving from behind, it's regional issue. We have nothing to do much with this, what's going on over there. We need Iran to be back to the nuclear deal. Today, Biden in his speech to the world at the UN, He talked about Iran. He did never talk about Yemen or about any other countries in the region, except that we need to back to nuclear Iran. The Iranians, they are smart. They always understand how this administration or how the US administration work and act accordingly. They don't see, I don't think they see Biden administration will put on them the pressure that they used to have during Trump. I don't think they see themselves, they need to make any concessions to anyone. I think they will raise their ceiling of requests from the American in Iraq, in Syria, and Lebanon, in Yemen. I don't see, I think it's mainly focusing on the land itself. They need the land. What I expect to see in the coming 2 years from now, something mixed between Iraq and Lebanon. Since we don't have majority Shia in Syria like Iraq, and we don't have Hezbollah strong enough like in Lebanon, I think the Iranian, they will keep Assad, because Assad is the crossing point between having militia and having allies and a proxy at the same time. I don't see they will say, Assad, you should leave for whatever reason. He represents their own interest. And that's why Assad is more with Iranian in reality on the ground than he be with Russian. I don't think that, for example, the Constitutional Committee will move any positive forward rather than just kind of statements. But again, why Iran to make concessions? For what the reason? I don't see, they see themselves as a winner. And they see them that Iran, the American or the international community is not pushing them to go forward. There's no much conflict between them and Russians. And I don't see there's competition between them and Turkey in Syria. The lines of interest is well defined. Turkey interest is very well known, South Idlib, a Jazeera region, and they don't care much to talk about Damascus or Daraa, for example. Daraa model was very clear how much Iran has an upper hand on the ground than the Russians. So the Russian, they make the deal with America in 2018, the understanding that Assad, the Hezbollah forces should be away from Jordan, Israeli border, something like 40 kilometers. Russian, they say, we agree on that, but look, guys, at the end of the day, Assad forces, since it's the legitimate forces, they should be control everything.
Sorry, Mr. Bassam, you have 1 minute left.
1 minute left. 1 minute left. I think we are in Syria. We will be in very bad position in the coming years. I think the model we will have already, we have it in Iraq and we have it in Lebanon. It will be something in between. And if no miracles happening, I think Iran will be in control. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That session was rich of very important information when it comes to the Iranian influence in Syria. As I said before, I do learn a lot from you guys, especially when it comes to the Iranian presence and tools. I just wanted to add a very important thing when it comes to the Iran and how Iran have different set of tools and different goals in each region in Syria. You see them doing something in Deir ez-Zor, not doing the same in Aleppo, not doing the same in Daraa. You see them aiming for to have some kind of influence in society in Deir ez-Zor. You don't see them doing that in Daraa. You see them that focusing on building some kind of a security legacy in, for example, throughout the private security military company. So basically what Iran is doing, having different set of tools which really complicate how to deal with Iran. But the important point that I want to talk about is really Iran was very strong in Syria. I see that there was no actual, in the previous year, there was no actual intention of eliminating Iran. There was no actual, for example, behavior or action to eliminate Iran. There was, from the Russian, they made some obstacles in regard of specific file. The Israeli raid, they were targeting a specific goal, not the whole plan for the Iranian. The end goal for the Iranian, they were able to achieve it. We see that the Israeli targeted the same location over and over again because they were targeting a specific goal at specific time, not the whole Iranian plan. This allowed Iran to evolve, to expand in different aspects and in different fields, gave her the luxury of time. And now, at that time, Iran focused on the quantity, not the quality. When we talk about the quality of the project that Iran did and plan to do, you see that it does not have the major, huge impact, but the quantity of these projects is a lot. They focused since 2017 on expanding throughout their project, throughout their small entities, and those small entities eventually they will evolve to a bigger entity. That was their plan. And instead of having to control or to have an influence on a big entity that will attract attention to Iran, they focused on dealing with small entity that allowed them to have the luxury of time and kept them in a stealth mode, and was difficult to point them out during the past year.
Can I say something here about
please.
that you are saying?
Yeah,
Two
please.
things very quickly. Being in Washington and Hamidi can feel this more like me. Look, the absence of American policy toward any crisis or any geographical area, it's very difficult to expect the other parts of the world to have their own ideas. But I try to say that, again, during Obama was in the mood to have deal with Iran. The whole international community was in the mood to have deal with Iran. So no one wanted to do anything on Iranian in Syria. During Trump, it was the opposite, that he wanted to punish Iran, but they have nothing to do with Syria. So the international community, even Israelis, they have the same idea. Let's punish Iran, but nothing to do with Syria, because we need the leader of the world to put something on the table to follow. No one countries, they can create their own ideas to follow. This is very important part. The absence of American strategy, policy, targeting in any region, not on Syria, will shape the world, how the world look into any area. This number one. Number two, about what you described exactly in the each geographical area, what the Iranian is doing. What I try to say that Iran, with the time, with what you have said, they want to create their own constituent in Syria. So in the future, if we have election like what we have in Iraq in 1 month, Iran will have 1/3 al-Mu'attal. They have 1/3 to say, we have our constituent Shia or pro-Iranian in the parliament, in the army, who are representing our own interest. They will never have their own militia, like Syrian militia, like Hezbollah, because they believe Assad is the leader of their own militia. In the meantime, they need Nujaba, they need Hashid, Fatimiyun, and Hezbollah to carry on all this operation. So that's why I'm trying to say that Syria will be mixed between Iraq and Lebanon. Since it's the major problem with Iran in Syria is the Sunni. They don't have safety network. They don't have constituent to support Iran. And even the people who are getting paid from Iran today, mainly they are getting paid because of the economic reason, not ideological reason. If things a little bit be balanced, most of these people will back to where they used to be. That's why I will see more foreigners, non-Syrian, coming to Syria to settle, just to protect Iranian influence. In the meantime, what you have said is very correct. They try to build political agenda. They try to do political parties, business people affiliated with Iran, just to have the third al-Mu'attal that they have in Lebanon. Yeah. So we will be in between Syria and Iraq. Lebanon and Iraq, sorry. I'm sorry for taking a lot of time.
No, it's okay. Thank you, Mr. Bassam. Just a quick reminder for our attendance guests, if they have any question, they can write it throughout the chat, or they can write one if they want to to say their question, not writing it. Now, in the geographical order, we end up with Lebanon. Lebanon is a very unique example of the Iranian impact because of the presence of Hezbollah and different other aspects. We have with us Ms. Mona Alami is one of the major experts when it comes to the Hezbollah network inside Lebanon and beyond Lebanon. She wrote a lot of papers and articles about Hezbollah, about the Iranian influence in Lebanon, mainly focused on the network of Hezbollah, how Hezbollah was able to expand its network in different areas, even to South America. And exactly when we when we talk about Hezbollah, it's something parallel or directed or interaction. There is an interaction with the Iranian. Ms. Muna, I will start with you with a question that have million answers. What exactly the Iranian did to secure their influence or to evolve their influence in Lebanon? The position of Hezbollah being close to the political procedure, having weapons. How did Iran took advantage of all that? Go ahead. You're mute. Just let me. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, Navvar. So first of all, thanks to Hezbollah, Iran has become the major player in Lebanon, unlike Syria, where it has to vie for power with other regional and international players. How has Iran achieved that? First, by imposing Hezbollah as the formidable military heavyweight that it is today. Second, by killing the country's political opposition or co-opting its most corrupt members, and we have a lot of corrupt leaders in Lebanon. And third, thanks to its alliance with President Aoun, which allowed it to control the country's foreign policy agenda and integrate Lebanon into the axis of resistance. So when we look to the first point, first of all, Hezbollah has been described as the world's most heavily armed non-state actor, and it's actually true. Hezbollah relies on a massive deployment of anti-tank and shoulder anti-craft missiles. It has medium-range rockets of at least 200 kilometers deployed alongside the border. It has, with the help of Tehran, created facilities in Lebanon to convert, and that's very dangerous, unguided rockets and missiles into precision-guided munitions. These are set up mostly in the Bekaa, and these can reach their intended targets, and they can reach as far now as Tel Aviv or Haifa. And according to interviews I've conducted with Hezbollah fighters more recently, Hezbollah is even capable of operating as a semi-regular army thanks to its role in Syria, as well as to coordinate air and drone attacks, the latest its fighters have told me, from Yemen into Saudi Arabia. So Iran has worked for a very long time. Hezbollah, we all know how it emerged in 1982 from a rift from the Amal movement. I'm not going to go into that. Hezbollah exerted its domination, military domination in Lebanon by endorsing a very legitimate cause, which was fighting the Israeli occupation. However, when the Israeli withdrew in 2000, Hezbollah retained its hold over its weapon under the pretense of liberating the Shab'a farm, which are Syrian. Like in Iraq, Iran framed its proxy narrative as, as Hezbollah's narrative as the only resistance movement against Israel first and Western occupation, then against Salafi forces with the beginning of the war in Syria. When I go to the second tool that Iran has used as well through its proxy Hezbollah, targeting, assassinating the opposition, as well as co-opting corrupt political leaders. So we had in 2005 the assassination of Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri, for which a member of Hezbollah has been found guilty. Iran started then to take over Lebanon. In the wake of the assassination of Hariri, a series of mysterious killings targeted very strong figures who opposed both Hezbollah and Syria and Lebanon. I'm talking about MP Gibran Twaini, Walid Eilu, Antoine Ghanem, as well as the director of operations of the army, Francois Al-Haj, several journalists like Samir Qasir and a reporter Maishida, as well as Minister Pierre Gemayel, who was assassinated and who was a fierce critic of Hezbollah in Syria. In Lebanon, no one could oppose Hezbollah and its sponsor, Iran, anymore. Iran also used co-optation to integrate its proxy into the Lebanese system further. it was already integrated very well. So when the most corrupt members of the political opposition were co-opted through coercion or tacit political agreement, Hezbollah's support allowed for the election of President Michel Aoun, and who gave them his, indefectible loyalty, and for the formation of a government that was headed by PM Saad al-Hariri, ironically, who is the son of none other but slain PM Rafiq Hariri, who Hezbollah is accused of killing. Hezbollah had this with Hariri and with Michel Aoun, had the cover of Lebanon's two largest communities, both Sunni and Christians, in a country that is known for its sectarian configuration. Third tool, the cover provided by Michel Aoun allowed Hezbollah indirect control over another very important portfolio, which was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that has been held by Aoun loyalists since 2014. Since since Aoun held this portfolio, we have been able to really aggravate our relationships with Arab countries. The Gulf countries, which are Lebanon's main financial supporters, have nearly ties with Lebanon, putting Hezbollah on the terror list, as well as screening Lebanese expatriates seeking jobs in the Gulf, as well as completely cutting aid to Lebanon, while Beirut, under the guide of Hezbollah, pushed for crude integration into the resistance axis and the shift to what it called to the east. When the Lebanese Intifada took place in 2019, very similar to what happened in Iraq, in the backdrop of the Lebanon's economic default on the Lebanese debts, this further cemented Hezbollah's hold on the political elite. How? Hezbollah and Amal, unruly supporters, clashed with peaceful supporters and in the street of protesters in the streets of Beirut, while security services very close to Hezbollah and to Nabih Berri arrested and beat protesters. The corrupt elite, which feared reform that could uncover the extent to which it had pillaged the system and the country, was only more marginalized and attached to Hezbollah, which became the guardian of a discredited and failing system. These are the tools that have been used by Iran and by Hezbollah to take hold of the system. However, we have several conclusions now with the current reality. The first conclusion is that despite Hezbollah's growing power in Lebanon and it dominates the system today, Iran hasn't been able to shore up Hezbollah during the crisis since 2018, as some has expected. It's true Hezbollah is still paying its fighters in dollars. It's still faring much better than any other political party, but interviews conducted with some of its fighters showed that most of the subsidies it used to give, and it used to give a lot of advantage to its fighters, have been cut. Additionally, charity ventures that were made more recently, such as Khazin al-Noor, that provide, for example, food at very low prices imported from Syria and Iran, have proven unreliable or less stocked. Other propaganda tools around Iran's fuel export to Lebanon, for now, until now, only propaganda, as they do not offer a long-term sustainable solution to the fuel and oil scarcity resulting from Lebanon's, decreasing funds. Unless Iran really decides to dedicate the full fuel support that it's sending to Lebanon solely to Shiite regions, I don't see that as a solution. And even if it does that, I think it will have to limit that support to certain areas. It will not be able to cover all Shiite regions all the time. The second conclusion that I have about Hezbollah is that Hezbollah's increased involvement in the states has made it vulnerable. Before, Hezbollah could say, I am the protector of, I am the resistance against Israel. Today, it's no more. It's part of the state. It's a dominant part of the state. It dominates the state. With the state collapse, the state collapse has been largely attributed direct allies of Hezbollah, who are very corrupt, and to the party's anti-Arab and Western rhetoric that hinder completely aid to Lebanon. Additionally, Hezbollah commanders and its politicians have been included in so many corruption scandals, one after the other, from drug trades with Captagon exported to Saudi Arabia, medication hoarding in the midst of a health crisis, to only name a few. Hezbollah has also been blocking the investigation into the Beirut port explosion probe, which killed in 2020 nearly 300 and injured 3,000 others. The explosion was also triggered by ammonium nitrate believed to have been imported by a nexus of Russian and Syrian figures close to President Bashar al-Assad, no other than Hezbollah allies. And Hezbollah is also believed to have used the port as a weapon storage. Third conclusion, and my last, the formation of, when we talk about the Raisi, the elections in Iran. So the formation of the new government dominated by Hezbollah and its allies was the direct result of a French and the new Iranian mediation. The big question is whether this government will be able to promote or initiate some reforms, such as a possible deal with the IMF or forensic audit of the central bank. I remain very skeptical because of the unwillingness of the political class to reform, and I don't see Hezbollah pushing these allies that it needs as a cover. However, Hezbollah still can bank on its monopoly over weapons during the next elections, as it will be hard for its opponents in South Lebanon specifically to run very independently, although the Bekaa region will be certainly a more challenging terrain for Hezbollah. Navvar?
Thank you, Mona. Thank you so much. That was, again, rich of information. You know, when we talk about this file, it's always, there is a word or there is a sentence that let us remember a new set of questions, not only one, new set of questions. And I always say that when we talk about the Iranian file, we need a couple of workshops, long workshop. Hopefully in the future, we will do something like this, even more into deep. Ending the panelist session, it will be about a close country that have a role in the region. Turkey had their role in Iraq. They have their role in Syria. We have with us Dr. Bilgehan. I really hope that I'm pronouncing the name right. She's a full-time academic at Marmara University, and she is the director at the Center of Iranian Studies in Ankara. She is known in her writing, and thank you for her. She's on travel, but she was able to join us. So my question is about, we saw, all of us, we heard now the Iranian role or influence or act in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. In your own thoughts and opinion, how did this or the Iranian behavior affected in this region affected the Turkish-Iranian relationship, and how is in general, how is now the Turkish-Iranian relationship? And a very small question about the Syrian opposition. We know that Turkey is one of the recent or the last, let's say, direct country that actually support the Syrian opposition military-wise, the National Army, which is basically one of their enemy is the Iranian-backed militia on the ground. How did this also affect the Iranian-Turkish relationship?
Thank you, Navvar, for having me in this panel. I'm pleased to be with the distinguished speakers. I'm the last speaker, so I'm aware that we have a limited time. So I'm gonna talk just about the core issues. While speaking about Turkey-Iran relations, we need to draw attention to the fact that there are areas of sensitivities, and these areas of sensitivities create security concerns. And the security concerns between Turkey and Iran sometimes urge the two countries to cooperate with each other or to compete with each other. And sometimes they do the two actions together. So it is side-by-side action. It's not clear where competition starts or where cooperation starts. And regarding the Syrian case, it is also the period of Rouhani administration. I can easily say that it was the first time for the bilateral relations in the last decade, because Turkey was mostly concerned about the instability in Syria and the instability that creates a haven for PKK, and Iran was insensitive to Turkey's concerns. So in Syria, the two countries were directly in the opposite sides, and it was a very hard time for Turkey and Iran in the years starting from 2013 to 2017. But the second period of Rouhani administration was relatively a better period because Iran reviewed its attitude towards Turkey, but it was not automatically happening. It was because of Turkey's determined position in Syria. Because Turkey started to have military operations, especially with the Operation Euphrates Shield in 2016 was kind of a turning point for Turkey-Iran relations in that period. Iran understood that Turkey is very determined on combating PKK in the north part of Syria. So in 2017, first General Muhammed Bakri, Iran Chief of Staff, visited the Turkish counterpart, Hulusi Akar, in Ankara. They both exchanged their security concerns. They discussed the instability in Syria, and at that time also Turkey started the initiative with Russia, which we call now the Astana process. At the beginning, Iran was not part of the Astana process, but Iran understood that without being in the circle, it will be hard to be a voice in the future of Syria. So Iran became the partner in Astana process, and the trilateral diplomacy started in 2017. Currently, we are not on the same angle with Iran regarding Syria, but I believe that we left behind the main dilemmas regarding the future of Syria. Currently, Iran is also aware of the fact that PKK is located, its affiliation, YPG or SDF, no matter how you name them, they are all the same bodies. They are also the direct problem for Iran, because we mostly in Turkey discuss why United States is arming YPG in a systematic way. It is not because of having an agenda towards Turkey. It is an agenda that directly linked to Iran, because by arming YPG, United States try to have a human resource in Syria that contains Iran's involvement. So Iran is aware of the fact that YPG is also a threat for their security, and that threat has links in Iraq, and currently Iran has some military operations towards PKK camps in Iraq. All these policies are linked together, and currently there are three main issues waiting Turkey and Iran. Number one issue is the future of Iraq and Syria. For Turkey, it is mostly relevant because Turkey perceives both Iraq and Syria through the lens of its combat against PKK. Because we don't know to what extent the United States will have a withdrawal from Iraq because we have just witnessed a withdrawal in Afghanistan. It is a kind of disaster. So that kind of disaster can be seen in the Iraqi scene. So both Turkey and Iran are exchanging their views about the future of Iraq, about the future of Syria. This is the number one issue. The second issue is the current situation in Afghanistan. Iran is the country that has a long border with Afghanistan, so their threat perception is a little bit different from Turkey, but Turkey is also facing the migration problem along with Iran. So there has to be a cooperation between Turkey and Iran regarding the migration problem coming from Afghanistan. Currently, Turkey has maximized its border security against migrant wave risk, and Turkey is exchanging views with Iran. It is not certain whether Turkey will be responsible for the protection of Kabul airport or not, but it's not a directly perceived problem for Iran, because Iran's agenda, Iran's areas of sensitivities regarding Afghanistan is a little bit different. So Turkey and Iran are mostly concerned on cooperation rather than competition regarding the Afghanistan case currently. I don't know whether this is gonna be the same in the future, but currently the both countries are mostly concentrated on the cooperation. The third issue that is on the agenda for Turkey and Iran is the Caucasus. There is a kind of a problem in the Caucasus. Currently, I am in Baku. Tomorrow, I'm gonna have a meeting both with the Iranian and Azerbaijani colleagues to discuss the future of Caucasus, because you know, following the victory that Azerbaijan gained against Armenia, Iran was a little bit hesitant about the situation in Caucasus, and Turkey directly supported Azerbaijan in the Caucasus, and there is an institutional cooperation between Turkey and Azerbaijan. And recently, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Pakistan hold a joint military drills in Baku, and this was perceived as a sensitive issue from Iran. Iranian army has some bodies on the Azerbaijan border currently. So we don't know whether Iran will join Turkey's six-way platform suggestion or not, because President Erdogan suggested to have a six-way platform in the Caucasus in order to have a peaceful situation rather than a competitive situation. This is gonna be the third critical issue between Turkey and Iran in the upcoming days. Maybe this is gonna be a wishful thinking, but I am a little bit hopeful about the Raisi presidency regarding Turkey and Iran relations, because Rouhani presidency was mostly about about having a nuclear deal with the international community. So relations with Turkey was mostly perceived as an area of rivalry rather than a cooperation. But Raisi now needs its neighbors, because the future of nuclear deal is not clear, and the messages coming from GCC countries are not very affirmative. So the number one country that Iran can have fruitful relations are currently Turkey, not other countries. So I'm a little bit hopeful about Reisi administration in terms of Turkey and Iran relations. That doesn't mean that Turkey and Iran will not have problems. It is a part of its character. The character of the relationship is shaped under these circumstances. But if we compare with Rouhani period, I'm a little bit hopeful about the Reisi administration. Let me stop here. Maybe we can continue on the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation about the ongoing Iranian-Turkish relationship. We have a set of questions that I received. First question that I got is from a fellow researcher, Bara Khurfan. This question is for Mr. Bassam. The question is about the recent talks between the Syrian regime and some of the Gulf area countries. How does Iran sees that? Is that a threat for Iran? Did Iran try to influence these talks? Mr. Bassam?
Again, the Gulfi, they don't have project and they don't have anything to offer. So they hoped for a while that reaching out to Assad regime, help him to open more to the international community, will push Assad to be away from Iran, to have more Arabic phase of the conflict rather than having Iranian phase of controlling the conflict. That was mainly the Emirates position. Little bit Saudi Arabia later on to say we should bring Assad to the Arab leagues and the Arab side in order to limit Iranian influence on that. But as I mentioned in when I talk, that the relation between Assad and Iran is much deeper than his relation with all Arab countries. So Assad will benefit more from that kind of approachment from the West, from the Arab countries, to get more legitimacy, maybe more money, but will empower Iran more in Syria because Assad is not able to say to Iran no. The things to say Iran is pushing this, or Iran will be upset of this, I think Iran will be very happy. Anyone recognize Assad, work with Assad, give him legitimacy, give him the money, that means Iran is winning, because for Iran, Assad regime is the proxy.
Thank you, Mr. Bassam. That is clear, and about the ongoing talks or the attempts for the GCC countries talks with the regime, and how does Iran sees that. Very important point is that Assad actually really cannot say no for Iran. Iran was able to build their own power in Syria way deep on the system in Syria that have an effect until this day in different fields. We have another question from the researcher Omer Özgelecek from SETA. The question is for the all panelists. I will read the question, and each panelist will have 2 to 3 minutes to answer the question. The question is, if a new nuclear deal between Iran and the US happened and Iran feel more free to expand its aggressive expansion, which area would be the first Iran would try to expand its influence? Which tools would Iran prefer for future expansion if the Iranian-US deal happened? That is like just what if will happen when if this deal happened. I will start with Dr. Hamdi.
Well, I'm not sure which area Iran will start expanding first. I would say that at least for the Iraqi militias and Iranian proxies in Iraq, we need to bear in mind that there's a certain degree of I don't want to call it independence, but a certain degree of planning for themselves. So it's not like that they are waiting for Iran waiting for a phone call from Iran to pursue their own policies. Obviously, they have their own plans, they have their own projects, they have their own interests, and they are, as I said, working in the military, security, political, and also economic spheres. This doesn't mean that they're not Iranian proxies. I mean, obviously, this is a completely different topic. They are definitely Iranian proxies. However, Iran is actually, the Islamic Republic is actually happy to give them a degree of independence, so that it doesn't need to guide them through different projects. When Iran interferes to channel their activities, it's when actually it sees their activities against its national interest. So they have their own projects, they have their own plans. A nuclear deal with Iran would give Iran a more, especially a nuclear deal that excludes any other activities apart from Iranian nuclear project. This is what obviously the Islamic Republic wants at the moment. That's why they have delayed the talks or the agreement. If that is achieved, then Iran will be able to even help its proxies more. That is definitely the case. It will give Iran a leeway, a time to plan better, and also better resources in terms of financial resources to expand or help its proxies expand. But whether which proxies or which area will be the first, I'm not sure.
Thank you, Dr. Hamdi, for your answer. Now we shift to Ms. Muna. Ms. Muna, the same question. What will change in the Iranian tools, influence, expansion? What expansion might happen in Lebanon if the US-Iranian nuclear deal happened? Just
Sorry. Yeah. I think it depends highly on the needs, where there's a conflict and where it needs to put or deploy its forces. I think that definitely Lebanon will take a big share of that because of the catastrophic economic situation, and because the Hezbollah has lost so much support within its own popular base, regardless of what people say. So it would definitely be able to restore a lot of the charity and the outreach it does to its community. So I do see a lot of, a lot of that aid, a lot of that funding going to Lebanon. But I also think that maybe we will see more reaction from Hezbollah against Israel. For example, we know that today Hezbollah cannot afford a war with Israel because when we had the war against Israel in 2006, Iran stepped in and rebuilt Dahye and partly the south, alongside also Gulf countries, but that's what it did. And that was the great promise. Hezbollah always made promises that it was able to maintain. Today, it cannot with the current economic situation. So maybe Hezbollah, it would embolden Hezbollah against Israeli attacks, because we've seen the increase in Israeli attacks in Syria in the last 2 years, and Hezbollah has had a very muted response against that. I also see a maybe more fund going to Yemen, because I think that Yemen is used at the current time as a pressure point within even the GCPOA negotiation. I know from the fighters that I speak, some of the fighters, I'm talking not of regular fighters, but of commanders with specialized skills. There's 100 to 200 who are deployed in Yemen by Hezbollah. And these people have very specific skills that have to do with missile, with communication, Yemen, and that assists the Yemenis in the war. And so that would also, like, more funding would allow them to also help more the Houthis, and maybe increase their deployment, or the increase, the deployment of Hezbollah members they have in Yemen, or the technical assistance they provide to Yemen. But we don't know tomorrow where another crisis will erupt. So it depends on where the next crisis erupt, and if Iran finds a way to integrate itself. And in Afghanistan, we've read about, I'm not an Afghanistan expert, but I've seen that Iran was training Shiite militias before the Americans were leaving Afghanistan. So anywhere where there's a conflict and where Iran has a reach, I think it would help its funding to its proxies there, and it would follow the blueprint of Lebanon to a certain extent. Every country, as Bassam said, is different from the other.
Thank you, Muna. Dr. Bilgehan, I'm gonna tune the question a little bit. What if, again, if the US deal happened with the Iranian about the nuclear deal, the sanction were removed? How does this impact the Iranian-Turkish relationship? On what level this will benefit Turkey if this happens?
First of all, I'm not that much hopeful about a nuclear deal in a short term. There are great deadlocks in the process, and one of the deadlocks is US insists on a follow-up agreement which intends to cover Iran's missile program and Iran's relations with the proxies. So it is not easy to leave these problems behind in a short term. But let's assume that all are solved and there is going to be a nuclear deal. At that point, it will be beneficial on Turkey-Iran economic relations, because there is a great desire in some Turkish businessmen to have some investment inside Iran. Maybe that would create some opportunity to have this kind of relationship. But in terms of political relations, it will at some point create tension, because once we have witnessed that Iran once gains power with the international community, starts to have some revisionist behaviors in the region and some problematic relations with the neighbors. So maybe it would create some sort of tension, but it depends on the circumstances. So to me, if there is going to be a nuclear deal, it's going to be a well-framed nuclear deal. It won't be the same that we have witnessed during the Obama period, because inside United States there is a great tension in the domestic politics. So there's going to be a midterm election in the United States. It's not easy to persuade even the Democrat senators regarding the Iran nuclear deal.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Bassam, in regard of the Syrian file, actually we saw in the beginning of this year a very massive hit from the Biden administration to Iranian location in Deir ez-Zor, but that did not happen again. A lot of Syrian experts were actually not terrified, but worried about the Iranian US deal in regard of the nuclear file and how it will impact the Syrian file or the Iranian influence in Syria. What if this happened? What do you see the future of the Iranian influence? How do you see the future of Iranian influence in Syria?
We will see it again. We have the model of 2015. So there's nothing new in that model, where the American will say, we have the UN resolution. We need the deal. It's up to Syrian to sit together on the Constitutional Committee to implement 2254. For the US or the international community, the deal is more important than Syria or the whole region. So that will give Iran more upper hand. That will, the Muhwar al-Muqawama resistance bloc will say, we win big time. We will not only in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and in Yemen. The deal, if it happens similar to 2015, literally will change the whole dynamics of the Middle East. And we start to see this when the leader of United Arab Emirates visited Turkey. This never one can imagine to happen 3 months ago. To meet the leader of Qatar, Emirates, Saudis 2 days ago. This is all this, the starting of fear that there will be a deal, and we need a regional power to support this small state, the Gulf states, from Iranian intervention, which is Turkey. So this will go much beyond Syria. But on Syria, as I said, and I think there is already divided line between Iranian interest, Turkish interest, Russian interest in Syria, 100%. So Turkey will not interfere in Damascus. Turkey is Idlib, and that's it. But the whole region, the dynamics will change. As I mentioned, that what will happen with the GCC with Turkey. I will not be surprised that within the UN meetings, the leaders of Saudi, Qatari, Emiratis will meet with President Erdogan, or later on. But this will happen. It will happen just because the people are really fear from the deal to happen the way it was on 2015. United States will tell the guys, look, we will protect you from Iranian military action, literally country to country, but we cannot protect you from the proxies. It's your problem. And till today, the American advice to Saudi Arabia mainly that you have to live with Iran, you have to change your attitude toward Iran, you have to change your colloquium from against Iran. So they are blaming the Saudis of Iranian behavior in the region. So this is all will show us where we are heading, as if there will be a deal the way you describe it. The whole region will pay the price in a negative way. And the American, I think, they will be more interested to protect the deal itself than give assurance to the countries who consider historically as allies to the United States. And here where Turkey will fill the gap with American blessing. So this is the shift of the dynamics that I'm expecting to see, or where we already started to see.
Thank you, Mr. Bassam.
But in Syria, it will be very negative. Unfortunately, on Syria will be in Yemen, in Iraq, in Lebanon. I think Iran will say we win. Khalas, it's done. Inshallah, I'm wrong. What do you think?
Dr. Hamdi.
You think my argument is correct?
Pardon?
Do you think my argument is correct?
Well, your argument is very grand, so which... No, I absolutely agree. As everybody agreed, if the nuclear deal exclude other Iranian activities, namely the missile activities and especially the proxies, then that would definitely be a win for Iran. That is definitely be the case, and materially and psychologically, Iran and its allies will feel the win, that's for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Hamdi. We have a question from the researcher Badr al-Mullah to Dr. Bilgehan. The question is that we see a reaction or a set of reaction or acts from the Turkish side with the American in regard of the support of the American to the SDF or PYD. Why do we don't have the same reaction toward Iran for her support of the Iraqi PKK wings, YPG? This is his main question, Dr. Bilgehan.
Actually, this is coming on the agenda several times, not very often, but sometimes I hear this kind of comments. It's not true. Turkey is critical whenever Iran has a direct or indirect relation with PKK. So I actually don't agree that Turkey is silent when it comes to Iran. Turkey mostly makes its relationship with Iran fragile regarding PKK issue. But in Iraq currently, Turkey and Iran mostly cooperate with each other towards PKK, not compete with each other. So if Turkey has a concrete issue towards PKK, if there is any direct link with Iran and PKK, Turkey never hesitates to be critical about it.
Can I add one point here, please?
Yes, please.
If I have time. Yeah. So Sanjar, especially, or Shengal, as the local people call it, it's a very, very sensitive area, and some of Iranian proxies already feel very itchy to attack Turkish presence in Iraq, and they have attacked actually Turkish bases, and they have killed some Turkish soldiers as well. So that is one factor, and they have threatened continuously the Iranian proxies. Sorry, the Iranian-backed Iraqi proxies or militias have continuously threatened Turkish forces in the region, and Turkish forces in Bashiqa and the surrounding and the other parts of Iraq are actually called hanging fruits by some security experts. It's easy to target them in terms of there are other political and let's say logistic dynamics that hinder the escalation. However, in terms of being able to for a militia being able to attack them, it is an easy target. And that could be one of the reasons that everybody at the moment is calm, but the major powers try to calm the situation down.
Thank you, Dr. Hamdi, and thank you, Dr. Bilgehan, for your answer. We have a question for Ms. Muna from Suhail about Hezbollah behavior, military behavior in some country. You said that Hezbollah have a military presence, 100 to 200 fighters in Yemen. Hezbollah is fighting in Syria. Hezbollah had the attempt to create something similar to it in Iraq. His question is, does this happen in coordination with Iran, or sometimes does Hezbollah have some kind of luxury to operate by themselves without going back to Iran, especially on the military file? Unmute, Ms. Muna. Sorry.
I have this issue with muting.
It's okay. I'm here.
Sorry. So when it comes to internal Lebanese politics, yes, Hezbollah has a leeway. I don't think it goes back to Iran. Every time it wants to make a decision. However, when it comes to military issues, especially after the start of the Syrian war in 2011, I really think that Hezbollah has become the expeditionary force for Iran in many regions where, Iranians had more trouble communicating. I think that Dr. Malek can maybe tell you also about Hezbollah's effort during the invasion, during support to Shiite groups for a long time during the war against the US in Iraq. So we saw that the Hezbollah was, because it was a Lebanese group, it was an Arab group, it had the language, it was more accepted. So it played an important role in Iraq, and it did even during the war on ISIS. I know from fighters here, and I think Dr. Malek can confirm it, there was a deployment of experts during the war on ISIS. The talk also between several hundreds of commanders giving expertise during the war on ISIS. And I know that even after the assassination of the head of the Revolutionary Guards Corps, I know that Hezbollah played a mediating role in Iraq. and it had the same role in Syria. So I think it's a matter of I think that Iran used, it built Hezbollah very well. It wanted to use the skills it had deployed, and the fact that it was an Arab player in a region where it could be more accepted than Iranians that were foreign to the culture. And I know also that even Hezbollah has provided, when it comes to the Yemeni, it provided for a very long time, since the start of 2011, not just military, but also political and propaganda support. Same, like a lot of what Dr. Hamidi Maleki spoke about Iran's support to Iranian militia in terms of propaganda and all that. So it also provided it to the Yemenis. And even for a time, I interviewed someone, and actually it made a lot of news in Nigeria. They were also training and indoctrinating Shiite Nigerians in Lebanon. I don't know if this program, that was several years ago, and it was actually interesting to see Nigerians in Dahye. That wasn't a very big venture, but it was still interesting to see that they had the that influence. They were used for that. So I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, thank you so much. We have, before I end with a joint question for all the panelists, we have a question for Dr. Hamdi. Dr. Hamdi, we saw that in regard of the what happened, the recent development in Afghanistan, does this will affect in any way the Iraqi file? Will we see an increase of Afghani in Iraq heading to Syria with the support of the Iranian? We saw some of the military equipment that fled from Afghanistan to Iran. We know that Iran have the Zainabiyun operating in Syria. They have some kind of military presence also in Iraq. How do you see this will impact the future of this region?
There's no big presence of Afghan people or Afghan elements in Iraq. Most Afghan citizens are Shiite clerics, and some of them are backed or affiliated with the IRGC and Iran, but there's no military presence in Iraq, and I don't think that what happened in Afghanistan will change that dynamic. Some people are speaking about the impact of Afghanistan on Iraq from a different perspective. The fact that what happened in Afghanistan is seen by so many actors and players as disastrous might change any withdrawal plans from Iraq. We know that there is a deadline by the end of December 2021 for combat troops to leave, US combat troops to leave Iraq, but also we know that there are not many combat troops in Iraq anyway. So, and even that might change in terms of the mentality of the US political leadership and also US military leadership. They do not want to see something similar. I mean, it's a completely different country, but still they do not want to see a similar situation in Iraq. And the US presence in Iraq is not a costly one anyway. Neither in terms of material cost or cost of lives for the US forces. Some groups, some even Shia militias do not want a complete withdrawal of US forces because they are benefiting from the relationship between Iraq and the United States in terms of economic strength that Iraq is getting. So going back to your question, before I start ranting more, I think that I haven't seen any huge impact of what happened in Afghanistan on Iraq at the moment.
Thank you, Doctor. Even we didn't see that impact in Syria. I was trying to monitor especially the Al-Qaim Bukamal crossing, to see if we will witness some kind of movement. No, we did not see, but something interesting about the Zainab Buyun in precise, recently they began in the beginning of 2020, they began operating and implementing kitchen project and small healthcare project for the society. I kept seeing Al-Fatimiyun, the Pakistani one, military presence or military act, but Zainab Buyun focused more on providing services for the very fragile community that was affected throughout a very long war. So that's also something to always keep in mind. Mr. Bassam, we have a question for you. I think it's our final question before we end. The question is that we recently see that the regime is putting a lot of pressure on some businessmen that either affiliate with Iran or have some kind of connection, indirect connection with Iran. Do you see that this is something that Russian is triggering, or is it a way? Is it just a PR stunt that is happening for a specific time and then things will go back to normal?
I think that simply the regime doesn't have the money, and they just back to the big mafia they created. They know how much money they have, and they are asking them to pay back to the government what they already stolen from the government or from the regime. I think this is the relation. It has to do something to do with Rabbi Makhlouf empire money, and the people who work with Rabbi Makhlouf, they should be loyal to Asma al-Assad and its own group, new group. So I think from that two dimensions, that the regime shortage of the money and Asma al-Assad consolidate its economic influence on Syria by eliminating people who are working away from her orbit. Rather than to say because this is of Russian or this is of Iranian affiliation. It could be related, but it would be secondary, not the main one.
Thank you, Mr. Bassam. Yeah, definitely, I agree with you. When we talk about the businessmen and the Iranian relation with businessmen, in 2018, we saw that the Iranian reinstated the Iranian-Syrian business forum. It was implemented, I think, in 2012, and then they reinstated it in 2018. Several visits happened, and some of these members actually visited Abu Dhabi even before the return of the relationship between Abu Dhabi and Damascus. So that's also something that can give us an idea about how Iran sees the reinstating the relationship with the Gulf, because just like you said, Iran knows exactly how much it can affect some decision making within the Syrian regime. So I think also that in regard of business, that Iran will keep building on the relationship with businessmen, aiming to build up a sub-network under those big businessmen, the known one, always trying to achieve some kind of new connection.
You know what, if I can add something just very quickly. Look, the Iranian, they used to send the family of martyrs, from Iraq war from 1982 till 1990 to Syria on daily basis. A lot of buses come with these families to go to the shrine in Damascus and Syria. So the Syrian society were in contact with Iranian community or society for almost 10 years. It's hardly you find the Syrian in Damascus away from the bazaar area speak Persian. Or hardly you can see real businessman who goes to Iran, like the way you used to go to Turkey or Egypt or Lebanon to buy products to sell in Syria. There was no, even when we have no problem in Syria, there is no revolution in Syria. The Syrian, they didn't find Iran as a market to buy or sell any products. We used to go to Turkey, Egypt, Lebanon, maybe Dubai. If luxury people, they go more to Europe, but never go to Iran. With the Syrian revolution, Turkey hosted 3 million Syria, Lebanon 1 million, Egypt, the Syrian doesn't need visa to go to Iran. Literally, the ticket is $100. It used to be $100. And there's no Syrian in Iran, not refugees, not visitors. What I'm trying to say that the whole society, from Muslim or non-Muslim, Alawite or Sunni or Shia, in general, they don't see Iran as a place to go and do business or live or learn. So that's why Iranian, they don't count much on the Syrian. They count more about non-Syrian, like Iraqis who are affiliated more, or the Iranian or the Lebanese or Yemenis who are more affiliated religiously with Iran. And on Syria, they try to build relation between government to government on the economic sector, that we saw so many MOUs, but they failed to find a group of strong business people representing the society to say, we represent Iranian interest in Syria. They find individuals here and there, but they never be able to find a group, solid group to represent them, till today at least.
Thank you so much. That was, I'm glad that I triggered this comment at the end from your side. Unfortunately, we finished our time for today. That was a very interesting panel.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for Dr. Hamdi, Dr. Bilgehan, Ms. Muna, and Bassam.
Thank you very much for you.
Thank you for also Omran and ORSAM for assisting in doing this panel. Hopefully, we can do something similar in regard of this topic in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your audience, and good night. Good night.